Bon, mais tant mieux. Le directeur parlementaire du budget a publié une note hier
oui, je l'ai lu.
réagir.
C'est intéressant.
Ben, il dit quand même que votre catégorisation,
mais
il n'est pas tout à fait d'accord. Il dit que vous mettez trop de choses dans les investissements en capital.
Peux-tu commencer par les bonnes nouvelles? Il dit qu'il est favorable, au nouveau cycle, comme vous l'avez entendu. C'est une bonne chose pour le pays, une bonne chose pour les parlementaires, nos entrepreneurs, les entreprises. Pour ce qui est de la catégorisation, vous savez, nous, on était très clairs sur ce que nous, on considère. On s'est inspiré de ce qui se fait dans d'autres pays aussi. Vous avez vu en Angleterre. C'est sûr que
vous allez plus loin que le Royaume-Uni, par exemple.
Mais ce qui est important, c'est qu'il y a de la transparence. Nous, on l'explique comment on le fait. Alors, les gens seront en mesure de décider, de voir, parce que l'idée, c'est que, comme on explique quand je l'ai fait, c'est qu'on ajoute de la transparence, c'est-à-dire que les gens vont être capables de voir, puis ça va être expliqué comme vous le faites présentement. On va dire aux gens ce que nous, on inclut. Donc, les gens vont être capables de voir ce qui est une dépense d'opération puis ce qui est un investissement en capital, parce que les critères vont être déjà publiés, vont déjà être connus, donc les gens vont avoir la transparence. Bien, à la fin, comme on l'a fait hier, puis je pense que vous l'avez bien expliqué, on va arriver dans le calcul du déficit, le calcul de la dette, de la même façon qu'on le faisait avant. Tout ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on donne une fenêtre de plus pour que les gens puissent voir où ça va dans les dépenses, ça va-tu dans l'investissement des dépenses, puis d'expliquer ce que nous, on considère qui va dans de l'investissement. Alors, ces commentaires, évidemment, on les prend toujours en compte. Vous avez vu dans sa note, il a parlé, d'abord, le nouveau cycle, il dit c'est une bonne chose, on remet pendule à l'heure. Deuxièmement, il dit le Canada fait ça comme ça. On s'inspire des autres pays du G7. Nous, on le fait à notre façon parce qu'on est un pays fédéral. Donc, c'est différent aussi dans un pays fédéral comme le Canada qu'un État unitaire en Angleterre. Il a fallu s'adapter. Mais pour répondre à votre question de façon très précise, on le dit d'avance. Donc, c'est là la transparence. Nous, on dit, nous, on va le considérer comme ça, puis on va l'inclure comme ça. Mais à la fin, les gens vont être capables de voir le déficit et la dette parce que c'est une façon de plus de présenter les chiffres aux Canadiens.
Est-ce que c'est une bonne chose que le projet de Keystone revienne dans les négociations avec les États-Unis?
Il faudrait... Vous avez entendu le premier ministre, vous avez entendu le ministre Leblanc là-dessus. L'idée, nous, c'est d'avoir une bonne entente, la meilleure entente pour le Canada. Donc, je vais les laisser s'exprimer sur cette question.
On the Washington visit, yesterday it sort of felt like President Trump was stringing along Mr. Carney. What do you think?
Listen, you have seen the comments, you've heard the comments from the Prime Minister, Minister Leblanc. What really matters is that we are all fighting to get the best possible deal for Canada. All of us, all Canadians, all parliamentarians, and obviously the Prime Minister and the government, we're fighting to get the best possible deal for Canada.
And yet the fight
and we'll
doesn't
continue.
seem to be yielding yet.
Is Keystone XL going to be revived? Is Keystone XL going to be revived?
Listen, you'd have to talk to those who were involved more directly in these discussions.
Are you supportive of it being revived?
Merci tout le monde.
Pensez de Keystone XL qui reviendrait, disons, au bout du jour dans les négociations avec les Américains?
J'ai pas d'opinion particulière là-dessus. Il semble qu'il faudrait que ce soit viable. C'est ça le point de départ. On n'avait pas cette assurance, surtout avec l'acceptabilité sociale aux États-Unis lui-même. Donc.
Mais en termes de viabilité, pour ce qui est de la cohérence avec les cibles de réduction des gaz à effet de serre, mais aussi
ce serait évidemment potentiellement problématique, mais d'abord, faut-il avoir un projet qui est viable.
Can we ask you about birthright citizenship?
Pardon me?
Can we ask you about birthright
Sure.
citizenship? And Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner says we should get rid of it. What do you think?
Get rid of it entirely.
Yes.
I mean,
Before a motion of the Immigration Committee.
I think the Constitution would disagree with her, and the court cases related to birthright citizenship. The odd thing about the Citizenship Act is we've never had a coherent definition of citizenship. So there is some discussion around whether you can pass on citizenship ad nauseum and with no connection to Canada. The current bill that's before the House proposes a cutoff that I think is rational, but simply to say that cut off birthright citizenship is wrong. It means potentially my kids wouldn't have citizenship. If it were retroactive, their kids wouldn't have it even if they had a connection to Canada. So it's a little ridiculous. I think there's something behind it that she can speak to eventually. It's perhaps populist to whip up sentiment against people that weren't necessarily born here.
Qu'est-ce que ça dit par rapport à l'état du débat sur l'immigration au Canada, qu'on en arrive là?
Je pense que vous voyez aussi clair que moi. Je pense que c'est une tentative d'essayer de rallier un sentiment anti-immigrant. Je ne sais pas à quel degré. Je pense en même temps qu'il y a lieu, puis on a un projet de loi devant la Chambre qui met un terme au droit de citoyenneté si les gens sont nés à l'étranger puis qui passent leur citoyenneté sans avoir aucune connexion au Canada. Il faut encore avoir une certaine connexion au Canada, mais évidemment, on sait ce que c'est, Mme Rempel.
Her argument is partially that there are so many more temporary residents in Canada, people on visas, international students, people who are waiting for asylum claims, that it makes sense not to offer those people birthright citizenship.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's a debate to be had in society. I think the general principle is that if you're born here, you have a connection here, and you have a right to be here. I think that's a pretty fundamental principle. I think it has some constitutional value, so she'll have to justify that to her base or to whoever she's trying to speak to, but that's up to her.
Sur le projet de loi, la nouvelle mouture du projet de loi C2 qui va être déposé cet après-midi, je vous demande en tant qu'ancien ministre qui a fait partie de plusieurs mandats minoritaires, de voir que ce nouveau gouvernement-là doit retourner à la table à dessin, redéposer un projet de loi pour s'assurer qu'il puisse passer. Qu'est-ce que vous avez comme réflexion, vous, là-dessus, de votre expérience?
Je pense qu'il y a une reconnaissance qu'il faut avoir un projet de loi qui tient la route. C'est clair parfois que le gouvernement, peu importe le parti, fait des projets de loi qui vont un peu trop loin. Mais écoutez, c'est la prérogative du gouvernement. Puis mieux ajuster le tir maintenant que plus loin quand le projet de loi se fait bloquer ou qu'il y a des objections qui sont légitimes. Donc,
quelle disposition allait trop loin, selon vous?
Bien, je pense que vous pouvez deviner vous-même, mais écoutez, je pense qu'il y a des préoccupations qui sont légitimes quant à la protection des informations personnelles et des choses qui devraient rester privées. Le partage d'informations, particulièrement avec les États-Unis, ça peut être une discussion qui est tendue. Donc, vous pouvez deviner autant que moi.
What do you think of how things went in Washington yesterday?
I think it went fine. I think any time that the Prime Minister is speaking to the President is a good day. They obviously have respectful dialogue, but also respectful disagreement. I don't buy the garbage that we have to come back with any deal. I think if we have a deal, it's got to be a good deal, and if we don't have one right now, then I think Canadians, we all need to be patient and get ready to dig in. We know we're dealing with an administration of the South that's unpredictable, that's become the routine. So in a business atmosphere where predictability means that you're able to understand where capital is being invested and have some understanding that it won't suddenly be taxed or tariffed is super important. So getting the right deal is more important than getting a quick deal.
Is Mr. Trump just stringing along Mr. Carney until the CUSMA negotiations next year?
Don't know. I'm not part of those discussions.
Has the government perhaps set expectations for a deal too high at this point?
Well, I think Canadians are rightfully worried. People are potentially going to lose their job as capital moves south. The expectations, I don't know whether they've been set high. They're quite realistic. I think the Prime Minister's been quite clear in saying that he doesn't want just any deal, and that's really up to him. The frustration at the negotiation table is something that you and I don't live, but it is very real, and if we're going to fight for Canadians, we can't just take any deal.
Ça vous a semblé comme satisfaisant comme rencontre, donc?
Oui, ben j'ai dit en anglais. Excusez. Ben, il me semble que quand le premier ministre parle au président, je pense que c'est une bonne chose, peu importe s'ils sont en accord ou en désaccord. Donc, je pense que c'est le silence puis l'incapacité de pouvoir aller de l'avant qui poserait problème. Donc, moi, je pense que c'était quand même une belle rencontre. Merci. Bonne journée.
I was stuck in committee yesterday, so I haven't done a deep dive in the full conversation. But I thought it's incredibly important that I think there's a path forward to a resolution, and it sounds like it was constructive. It sounds like we're going to be able to resolve some of the more challenging issues. So, early days still, but from everything I've heard, I have some optimism. But I got to do a deep dive on it.
It seems like Keystone XL might be revived. Are you supportive of that?
That again, I haven't done a deep dive. I don't know what was discussed. I don't know what the commitments were. So to be determined. Yeah.
What do you think of this talk about reviving Keystone XL?
I mean, I won't comment on a rumor at this point, and I'm not, as you know, I'm not involved in the trade negotiations with the U.S.
Est-ce que c'est une bonne c'est une bonne chose. Que Keystone revienne dans les négociations.
Comme j'ai dit à vos collègues, là, je ne vais pas commenter sur une rumeur et je ne suis pas impliqué dans les négociations commerciales avec
It's just a rumor, though. The Prime Minister has brought it up. So what do you think? Is that something you would support?
I haven't heard the Prime Minister say that.
Thank you
Mais
so
ça
much.
va dans le message, non?
Carney raised Keystone XL with Trump. I guess, I don't know if that means reviving the project, that's on the table, but as an Alberta MP, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Keystone XL is one of those projects that's been kicked around for a long time. Certainly, it could be another one of the levers that increases North American energy security, and so it certainly warrants exploring. But of course, the devil is always in the details on these things, so we'd have to see how it came out of those conversations. For sure.
In talking about the grand bargain that Carney's talking about, we've often thought about the Alberta proposal to the BC coast, but could a Keystone XL be part of the grand bargain, or a pipeline into the States like that?
Yeah, the grand bargain really is about how do we continue to grow the oil and gas sector while continuing to decarbonize the Canadian economy. And so, yes, it could potentially be part of that overall conversation. There are some benefits that Canadian pipelines would also provide, which is access to new markets. So it's got to be weighed against a number of other considerations, including, our desire to diversify. And there's a lot of things in the mix right now, and we'll have to see how it shakes out.
But if we build a new pipeline, say a Keystone XL, what happens to the oil and gas cap? Like, can it last? Like, can it be put in place?
Really, it gets down to the specifics, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can run pipelines. You can run them at different speeds. There are realities that pipeline capacity, you need more in the winter because you need more condensate to move products. So some of it is about efficiencies overall, but again, until there's a specific proposal, it's hard to say too much.
Does the government know something that we don't know about, like a proponent to revive Keystone XL or something? I think Southbow was the company that's sort of involved now or something, but what's up with that?
Well, if the government knows something, not this part of the government yet, so we'll see. Okay, thank you very much.
Stop people too early.
Thank you very much.
The prospect of taking a look or possibly ending birthright citizenship in Canada. I wonder what you think of that.
I believe that we should maintain birthright citizenship in Canada, and I don't know if I can be any more direct than that. I think when you start to pick and choose who amongst Canadians gets the full benefits of citizenship, you obviously enter into a very troublesome conversation. One of the things that's very important to us is that governments don't get to pick and choose which Canadians get to have their rights fully realized. And to the extent that we can have certainty in the law guided by the rights that accrue to all citizens, I think that would be a preferred approach.
Minister, about the letter of the 5 prime ministers on the clause dérogatoire, what do you answer to that? They're calling for the government to take it back, the intervention. So what do you answer to that?
Look, I find that position untenable on the part of 5 of Canada's 13 premiers. It's ironic in some ways when you see that there are provincial interventions being made in the same case. Keep in mind that this is not an initiative that the federal government has launched. This case comes from a law that was adopted in Quebec that was challenged by Quebecers, that has been through a years-long process of Quebecers making those appeals that have brought this to the Supreme Court of Canada. It engages issues of national concern. Clearly, the interplay of the notwithstanding clause vis-a-vis the rights and freedoms that the Charter guarantees to all Canadians is something that will be of national importance, that will have lasting impacts. It is unimaginable that a federal government would not intervene to share its perspective on the meaning of the Charter, particularly at a time when in Canada and around the world, democracies are increasingly under strain. Courts' independence are being questioned. We are going to stand ardently in defense of the Charter and the rule of law, and thankfully it will be the court and not a federal or provincial government who will make the decisions.
So you're citing. So you're citing things that are happening around the world. You're saying that overreach of parliaments could happen here.
Yes, certainly. Look, more specifically, we are at a time right now where I'm seeing institutions more broadly being strained. You see it with global trading relationships that are fraying. You see it on the international level with a member of the UN Security Council standing in open defiance of the very values that underpin the UN Charter. Russia's invasion of Ukraine questioning not only territorial integrity, but sovereignty of nations, self-determination of peoples. Countries around the world are seeing political capture of their judicial actors. And this has been going on for a number of decades, but you see it more frequently. Countries are adjusting their voting laws in order to usurp power from their citizenry to embed it within the executive instead. We have to be very, very careful because our future downfall as a nation, should it ever come, it's not going to be the hands of some despot on the other side of the world. It's going to be some future government who is empowered by an erosion of our rights today. And if we are not very careful, we are going to see bit by bit the rights that we enjoy as Canadians will come to cease to exist, and we will have no one but ourselves to blame. We're going to do what we believe is the right thing to advance independent legal arguments and have the court independently determine the validity of those different positions. I welcome the premiers to advance their own legal arguments, but I believe that those questions of law should be answered in court rather than being the subject of a political debate when we have this parallel proceeding taking part at the Supreme Court.
Quebec doesn't threaten the courts, though.
What's
that? The Quebec government doesn't threaten the courts, though.
No. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that is the strategy of the Quebec courts. I've had multiple meetings, with my counterpart in Quebec, and I do not want to be misunderstood to suggest that any provincial government is making an attack on the courts in this instance. But I do think when you're looking at the rights that Canadians enjoy, the position that we have taken is that the notwithstanding clause is not meant to permanently allow provincial governments or federal governments, for that matter, to permanently damage the ability of Canadians to enjoy those rights, and that the notwithstanding clause does not permit any level of government, provincial or federal, present or future, to silence the courts when the rights, in fact, are violated by a law. So to us, this is about the system that is in place more broadly, not about the specific instance in any given case. But to be clear, I don't want to allege that any particular provincial government or current federal government is attacking the courts, only that we need to ardently defend our rights. And I'm looking forward to the court giving an independent interpretation of the arguments that we put forward and that other interveners have advanced as well.
Can I just ask you about C9 real quick?
Certainly.
I just had a letter from about 39, I believe, civil liberties organizations just calling for a rethink on C9. One of their main ones was the Attorney General consent, removal of the need for that for the state property charges. They're calling it it could risk arbitrary, inconsistent, and selective enforcement without that suit. And just could I get some response on that?
Yeah, certainly. So we undertook a series of consultations to arrive at the version of the bill that we put forward. One of the things I've said privately to my parliamentary counterparts and publicly, in fact, in the House of Commons, was that should the committee hear witnesses that would justify reasonable amendments to the bill that don't threaten the spirit of what we're trying to achieve, to allow Canadians to live free of hate in their communities, we would certainly entertain those good faith amendments that may come forward through the process. On this specific point that you've raised around the Attorney General consent, after the conversations that I've had, one of the things that we've determined is that the additional layer of political scrutiny on what would normally be an independent decision made by law enforcement or Crown prosecutors to move forward with charges is something that in and of itself could jeopardize the independence of that analysis. We believe that over time there has been clarity after a number of Supreme Court cases and lower court cases that have interpreted those hate provisions that can distinguish between what is ordinary speech and where has that transitioned into a criminal context with the public incitement of violence or with the willful promotion of hatred. As that line has become clearer over time, we believe that law enforcement and Crowns are better able to make reasonable independent decisions than they were when this was a brand new area of the law.
And just, I usually wouldn't complain about concise legislation, but it's only about like 9 or 10 pages long. Are you open for amendments, changes to it as it goes along in this process, or are you hoping to see it pass fairly quickly as is?
Well, look, my starting point is the scale of the ideas behind a piece of legislation is not dictated by the number of pages contained within it. It's the value that those ideas bring to the experience Canadians live in their communities. As I've indicated just a moment ago, should there be reasonable amendments that come forward informed by expert testimony of those who appear at committee, we would be more than willing to entertain them in good faith. I've had a few conversations with parliamentary colleagues about about areas that they may have interest in. I'm going to leave it to the committee to do their work independently, free of interference from my office, and we'll look forward to the version of the bill that they return to the House should they deem it worth adoption.
Okay. What do you think about this idea Michelle Rempel Garner had to restrict birthright citizenship? She put it at committee yesterday. Do you think if you're born here, you should be a Canadian?
So I'm looking forward to C3 advancing through the House, and we will see what happens in the House, and then of course it'll go to the Senate. So I'm looking forward to the legislation.
Can we ask you about that fish plant in New Brunswick?
En français?
No, actually, but if you'd like to speak French,
Je peux essayer.
One of the questions I had when I read the story, there's a big fine, of course, for this particular plant. What happens to the workers at that plant? Does your department take any interest in the welfare or safety of the workers?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, listen, we'll get back to you on the specifics of that particular plant, but typically if there's abuse found as well, then there's additional fines for abuse, and work permits aren't renewed, etc. So we'll get back to you on those specific work.
How does the process work in funding?
Whoa. Sorry, let's just finish this and then I'll come back to you.
I just wonder too, for the fine is $1 million, it's a maximum fine. Does that money just go into general revenue, or could it be used to assist into a fund that could be used to assist
These are
workers?
great questions that I don't have the answers for,
Okay.
so I'll have to come back to you. You're good questions, and I should ask. I will get back to you.
On Canada Post, we haven't heard back from CUPW about the response to this latest offer, but they have repeatedly, gone back to the company saying they don't like the deal they're being offered. They're saying it's worse than the previous deals. If they come back and say we don't take this offer, what happens next? Will the government intervene?
No, listen, these parties have to sort it out. They have to, first of all, realize that the responsibility is on the parties. There is a union and there is an employer and there is a process, and they all know the process. The process is that they negotiate till they get to a deal that everybody can live with. And so our expectation is if the union is not satisfied with that offer, they should table a counteroffer. That's how mediation works, that's how negotiations work, and the Federal Mediation Service is there to help them have those conversations and work through those.
Are you going to step in, though, to use Section 107?
Look, my expectation is that they all see the cards that are on the table and that they find a deal.
For the truckers, the Bloc is calling for an inquiry about all of the illegal work.
I don't know how to say that in French. Misclassification.
Yeah. So there's a lot of demands that are in the system. They presented that. Are you working on that issue?
Oui. Dans 2021, nous avons déclaré c'est illegal cette pratique, cette approche. And so with the committee, I'm looking forward to the recommendations because we agree this should not happen. We've made it illegal.
Is it still happening, and it's happening
Oui,
more,
je pense.
so
Je ne sais pas le taux de la practice. Is it practice? The practice, mais yes, it is still happening, and fines are still being applied, and we're working with CRA to get the data to truly unpack when this is happening. It's not as easy as you might think to be able to understand who is a private employer, who is being misclassified, but we have every sincere intent of cracking down on this. Obviously, the law says it's illegal, so I think the committee's work is going to be very helpful because they will also hopefully uncover new tools that industry agrees with and that workers agree with.
Thank you so much. How long this situation can last? While we approach,
I have no more to say. I think it's very important that the parties do their work, and Canadians are counting.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
C'est un enjeu partagé entre les provinces et le gouvernement du Canada. Pour ce qui est du gouvernement du Canada, ça a trait avec le Code canadien du travail. On s'attend à ce que les compagnies respectent le Code canadien du travail, que les gens soient rémunérés, profitent d'avantages sociaux. Et je sais que la ministre Haidou s'attarde beaucoup sur la question. Je pense que ce que fait notamment le gouvernement du Québec en exerçant un meilleur contrôle, c'est une bonne chose.
Mais vous, êtes-vous préoccupé de voir des chauffeurs qui n'ont peut-être pas d'expérience, peut-être pas les capacités de conduire? Ces gros camions-là peuvent se poser un danger sur nos routes?
Bien, comme conducteur, oui, ça m'inquiète. Donc, Je pense que le gouvernement du Québec, qui certifie évidemment les chauffeurs, doit agir et doit avoir un certain contrôle.
You said a couple weeks ago you wouldn't negotiate with other parties in the lead up to this budget. Have you changed your stance on that? That's not what I said. I was asked if I would bargain and give away, Will you bargain now? Has that changed? No, I was asked specifically if we were into trading projects and things like that. I always have said that we will collaborate and discuss and negotiate with opposition parties with respect to legislation and the business of the House of Commons, and that's what we'll do every day. Are you concerned at all at the moment that you will have difficulty finding a dance partner to pass this budget?
You'll have to ask the other parties that. We're going to bring a budget forward, and we'll be asking the House of Commons to approve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have an update. What I'm hearing are there some, conversations around possible solutions, which I welcome. I have been just slightly back and forth with counterpart in Ontario, and certainly support their work on solutions. And no, I'm completely open to looking at permits.
What do you make though of Brandon?
It showed there really isn't anything behind it. When I asked the most basic question as who would you appoint to decide these things, he threw up his hands and said he didn't know. So it's an unserious thing that impacts Canadians' ability to vote, and I think it was on full display yesterday.
Do you think the committee or Parliament's going to make changes to the elections law?
I can't speak to Parliament. I agree that some changes to be made. I think the Chief Electoral Officer has put forward some changes. The Conservatives have suggested some changes. I think both are reasonable. So we're still going to hear a few witnesses, and we'll see what the committee's recommendations are.
Who are the next witnesses?
That's an excellent question. Oh, that's bad.
We're working with provinces and territories to, for example, do checks through weigh stations to try to detect workers that are being misclassified in this way. This is a joint effort because, of course, many of the regulations around trucking are provincial, but the federal law gives us extra tools, including working with CRA to try to uncover this practice and ultimately protect these people who are being exploited.
Should you have access to the information CRA has in order
we do work with CRA in terms of trying to use
My
that.
understanding was that the information was going just one way from ESDC to CRA.
Well, I mean, look, I think there's obviously protections for privacy within each department, but there's been a very good collaboration between ESDC and CRA in terms of trying to get access to data that will help detect this kind of misclassification.
It seems like it's not enough. Like, people are still dying on the roads, and in Quebec, some families were decimated because of that.
Which is tragic, right? I mean, ultimately, whether or not that was a misclassified trucker or not, provinces have a really important role to make sure. I mean, you're talking about the corporation of a structure and then driving laws. Driving laws should be intact, and those are provincial responsibilities. People who are on the road should have to pass the appropriate licensing. There should be appropriate monitoring of driving practices. There should be appropriate fines laid. All of that is within the provincial jurisdiction. So we have to take this seriously in terms of training, licensing, and ensuring that people who are on the roads are actually equipped to be able to drive heavy equipment and trucks. My son is an operating engineer. He works in the province of Ontario. He hauls machines back and forth using a semi-truck. I can tell you right now, those standards are all provincially regulated. My job is to try to make sure that companies aren't using temporary foreign workers in a way that is avoiding their obligations around pay structure, around reporting, around taxation, and that's kind of a different conversation than the enforcement of regulations that exist in the provincial space. But I will agree with one other thing that you've said, which is it's a tragedy for everyone when that happens, when people are not properly trained, when they're not properly supported, and when those regulations aren't enforced.
Follow up to the Fisher's question from my colleague. What are you doing to help those temporary foreign workers that work for that company that's been fined like $1 million?
Part of the work that we've done over the last 5 years, and I was a minister actually in 2018, was to fund advocacy groups like the Migrant Support Network to ensure that workers who are temporary workers in Canada have places to go and get that support in their own language with a sense of safety and with navigation that really supports them in their particular circumstances. But look, what I think these fines show is that the program of enforcement is actually working. We're catching those bad actors, and the real focus that our program has is prevention of this kind of abuse going forward.
And those fines will be going to help those workers, or is it?
The fines go back to general revenue. Unfortunately, the challenge with any kind of fraud in any workplace is that it's on individual employees then to take action to sue the worker or the employer to take action to try to recover those wages. The migrant support networks can help, though, because they can provide that support and guidance in the language that the temporary foreign worker speaks, potentially, or with tools that they may not be aware of in a foreign context.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
About the Via Rail payouts, the $31 million because of delays because of CN Rail, you know what
I talked about it yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think about it? Can you expand on it? What are your thoughts on them paying out that much money?
Well, what's troubling is that passengers, customers are not getting to their destination on time, and Via Rail, we have to work with them to make sure that that performance improves.
What more does the government have to do to help support this and move along so that corporation isn't paying out that much?
Well, part of the key of successful rail transportation is having a predictable schedule and on-time performance, and that's where Via Rail has to focus its efforts.
I take it all the time too, and I'm delayed to get to my family's house, all that kind of stuff, because I guess the rail lines are not owned by Via. What, now that there's key projects coming up and potentially the new fast train to come through, all that money being spent, how is that going to, how are we going to fix this situation?
Well, rail transportation in Canada is something that has vast potential, and as you know, the government is investing in and studying very, very closely the possibility of proceeding to a new technology, high-speed rail, and with that work is continuing, it's ongoing.
And any more on the meetings yesterday from the Oval Office? Have we heard anything more on a deal or anything? I know the Prime Minister.
I'll let the ministers talk about that.
Minister, can I ask you a bit more about VIA? Do you think that the federal government has a certain responsibility here? Because VIA will point to the fact that it has to use tracks that aren't theirs, and that's causing a lot of delays. Does the federal government have a responsibility here? That's
absolutely a factor. And we were talking about high-speed rail. Part of the issue is that they have to share infrastructure with freight and cargo rail, and that's a constraint. We know about that, so we'll make sure that Via Rail is working on those things that they can control, and if hunch is right, we can hopefully improve our performance here.